Hello and welcome to today's Euractiv debate on EU-Kazakhstan relations. Today we're asking the overarching question, what are the drivers for increased economic cooperation? In recent years, the relationship between the EU and Kazakhstan has evolved significantly. We've seen increased economic cooperation as well as political dialogue. And last week, Agriculture Commissioner Janusz Wojciechowski led a delegation of businesses and organisations from the EU to Astana to look at how we can develop the relationship even further and deepen those ties. So today we are going to hear from the Commissioner as well as from Deputy Foreign Minister Roman Vasilenko. We will hear some keynote addresses from them, then we will have a so-called fireside chat before moving on to a panel discussion with experts. As always, during the discussion, you will be invited to ask your questions of our speakers as well. You can do that using the Slido tool, or if you're joining online, you will see the chat function. If you want to go to Slido, you can simply go on your browser to slido.com and put in the code EU-Kazakhstan. For those of you who can see the QR code or here in the room as well, please do scan that with your smartphone or device and it will take you directly to the page where you can put your questions, and we will try to get through as many of those as is possible in the next hour and a half. My name's Jennifer Baker. I'm a policy journalist based here in Brussels and I will be your moderator today. But first, I'm very delighted to welcome, to start us off with his keynote address, Deputy Foreign Minister of Kazakhstan, Minister Roman Vasilenko. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Dear Madam Baker, dear Commissioner Wojciechowski, dear friends, it is a pleasure to be back here in your wonderful studio in Brussels of Euractiv. The European Union is one of Kazakhstan's key international partners, and our comprehensive dialogue enables us to address issues constructively and effectively. Cooperation between Astana and Brussels has yielded significant results, including the signing of the agreement on enhanced partnership and cooperation that we signed back in 2015 and that entered into full force in 2020. And our partnership is based on genuine friendship, mutual respect, and strong ties. Our political interaction has reached a new level in recent years. This was clearly demonstrated in 2022 during the visit to Astana by EU Council President Charles Michel, and later, last June, in June 2023, during the meeting in Cholponata in Kyrgyzstan between our President, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, and again President Michel. Regular high-level meetings have further expanded our multifaceted cooperation. Our joint efforts have solidified EU's role as Kazakhstan's largest trading and investment partner. The EU now accounts for over 40% of foreign investment in Kazakhstan and about 30% of our foreign trade. Last year, trade turnover increased yet again by rather modest 3.5% to $41.4 billion according to our statistics, with Kazakh exports standing at $31 billion. Investments from EU countries reached $10.4 billion last year, and on average, the European companies have been investing in Kazakhstan $10 to $12 billion a year, but since 2005, European investments in Kazakhstan have already surpassed $180 billion. More than 3,000 European companies, including multinationals such as Eni, Total, Amazon and Werke, Air Liquide, Alstom, Carlsberg, and many others successfully operate in various sectors of our economy. We are very optimistic about future success stories, especially following the recent business mission of European agricultural companies to Kazakhstan, led by EU Commissioner for Agriculture, Mr. Janusz Wojciechowski. We see the numerous high-level meetings, talks, and business forums in Almaty and Astana with the EU delegation as having been very fruitful. And dear Commissioner Wojciechowski, once again, I thank you personally for making this visit and this mission happen. However, we still have untapped potential for significant progress in key areas. During a visit to Brussels by Foreign Minister of Kazakhstan Murat Nurtlev last May, that is May 2023, we identified jointly with the European Commission and the European External Action Service several priority areas for cooperation. These include, among others, upgrading and expanding and diversifying EU investment in Kazakhstan, strengthening infrastructure and connectivity ties between us, including the development of the Middle Corridor, food security, energy, climate change, and critical raw materials, again, among some critical and important other areas. We hope a potential visit to Kazakhstan by the President of the European Commission will also provide a strong impetus to these plans. Geopolitical and geoeconomic shifts, both regional and global, have strengthened our partnership to address common challenges. And these topics will be discussed in detail tomorrow at the already 21st EU-Kazakhstan Cooperation Council meeting here in Brussels with my participation. And this meeting will be instrumental in achieving our shared goals and objectives, and I look forward to productive discussions today and tomorrow. And I'm very excited to be part of this discussion, which I hope will also help identify new potential areas of cooperation and help identify ways to solve the challenges we jointly face. Thank you. We'll be happy to participate in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, for setting out some of the aspirations for our conversation today, as well as giving us some top-line statistics. As I said, we are very delighted to have, giving up his valuable time to join us today, the Commissioner for Agriculture in the EU, Janusz Wojciechowski. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Vice Minister Vasilenko. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to participate in opening of this conference and to welcome Mr. Vasilenko here to Brussels. Just a few days ago, I returned from Kazakhstan, where I had several meetings with Mr. Vasilenko, also the many very important meetings with Prime Minister Bektenov, Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Saparov, with Ministers of Justice, Science, many meetings. But thank you, Mr. Vasilenko, for your personally for your positive and helpful engagement. Thank you very much. As Mr. Vasilenko mentioned, I led a productive high-level mission of great political importance to the European Union and of great personal importance to me. The focus of my mission was to strengthen our partnership in agri-food trade. This is a vital aspect of our relationship with a total economic value of over €1 billion and a deeper value in connecting our citizens and our cultures. Although agriculture was my focus last week, I also had the opportunity to explore a broader picture of our relationship and see Kazakhstan's great potential across a number of areas. As a source of critical mineral resources, as a middle corridor connecting Europe and Asia, and as a strategically located educational and business hub in Central Asia. Based on my visit and meetings last week, and to support our discussion today, I would like to share my thoughts on how we can unlock this great potential and further develop our cooperation. First of all, we must continue to strengthen our political engagement, which creates a positive environment for progress. During my meetings with Prime Minister Bektenov and with Mr. Vasilenko and his colleagues, there was a clear willingness on both sides to reinforce our political contacts and cooperation. For example, we confirmed our shared commitment to finalize negotiations on the protection of geographical indications for agricultural products as soon as possible and for our mutual benefit. Secondly, we must work together at a technical level. A number of logistical and artificial hurdles prevent us from achieving a closer relationship, such as transit difficulties and trade barriers. During our meetings, we committed to address these issues through our respective services to find technical and viable solutions for both parties. Finally, I believe we can achieve great things by working together at a personal level. For instance, last week I was accompanied by a delegation representing some of our biggest agri-food companies who had over 400 business-to-business meetings with their Kazakh counterparts. I can report on positive feedback already. By establishing personal contacts in these meetings, our respective businesses have been able to develop understanding and trust, the basic foundations of any long-lasting relationship. I firmly believe that the same results can be achieved in other areas, in education, for example, where Kazakhstan is seeking to extend its partnership with European universities. And that is why events like this are so important. Today we have an excellent opportunity to discover more about each other and to make new connections. So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a positive and productive day, and I invite you to explore all of the exciting roads to lead to a closer relationship between Kazakhstan and the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. If I could now invite you both gentlemen to join me on the stage, we will have a brief chat about some of those priorities that came out of the meetings that were taking place, particularly last week. So, Commissioner, if I may start with you, I know you've given us an outline of some of the meetings you had and some of the discussions you had, and I know that there's a lot of elements in the trade between the EU and Kazakhstan. We see a particular focus, particularly on oil, gas, minerals, these sorts of natural resources. But I'm wondering, where do you see the agricultural side fitting in the mix, and whether you consider that the agricultural side will be so prominent in the future?
As I said, the Kazakhstan is a very important partner for the European Union. And what is important about our trade relations in agriculture? The total value of the trade is 1.2 billion euro, with some surplus for the European Union, because our export to Kazakhstan is about 700 million euro, our import from Kazakhstan more than 400. But there is a huge space for increase of this volume. But there are generally two barriers. One is, of course, the geographical distance and problems created by the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the war, and as you know, the Kazakhstan is the biggest country in the world, having no access to the open sea. This is the problem, that we have the transit via Russia with many problems, and open but difficult and costly transit via Caspian Sea, which is the majority used. But there is potential. It was interesting that during my visit in Kazakhstan, 2 times I saw the trucks from Europe, from my country, Poland, in Kazakhstan. First time in Almaty, second time close to Astana. It shows that there is the geographical distance is not this is barriers, but the business is ready to break these barriers and to continue the business. And it was not opportunity to stop and to ask what they delivered to Kazakhstan, but it is possible. And of course, we should to reduce this barrier. First of all, And I'm very happy after my meetings in Kazakhstan, because these meetings with Prime Minister Bektenov, with Minister Saparov, we had a very long discussion with him, because he is responsible for functioning of the inspections and the SPS rules in Kazakhstan. But they are very promising, and we are ready to reduce barrier from both sides and to facilitate the trade relations. And I hope that we will see as quick as possible the results of this goodwill on both sides in our trade statistics. That there is potential. The minimum is to double our value of our trade in the near future. And yes, this is but there is also the other aspect, our strategic vision of the question of the food security. That it was very interesting, my trips from Astana to Karaganda, and I participated in a very important ceremony of Memory Day in Kazakhstan, the Memory Day for the memory of the victims of the Stalin's regime, including my compatriots from Poland. And thank you for the Kazakh authority for commemoration for this memory of these victims. It was very impressive. And it was also opportunity to see the rural areas or the areas which are ready for agricultural production. I think there is no other country. The Kazakhstan is the country with the highest potential to increase agricultural production in the future. And we need to increase our food production in the future. 40% according to the FAO forecast, 40% to 2050. We have no opportunity to increase the agricultural production in Europe. We lost 1% of agricultural land during 1 decade. 1% maybe is not so big, but this is the territory of the agricultural land in Belgium, for example. That we have no opportunity to increase agricultural area for agriculture. Kazakhstan has more than 200 million hectares, which is only part is used for the... One half, yeah. Is used for agriculture. And the cooperation also is very important, because the role of Kazakhstan will be, I'm sure that will be bigger and bigger to ensure food security at the global level. This is also global point of view from the strategic cooperation to ensure food security at the global level. It's very important.
Deputy Minister, we will talk in more depth about some other issues on the panel, but I'd be interested to get your first impressions as well, and whether you feel the same as the Commissioner, that there is huge scope for increasing, particularly in this agricultural sector of trade.
Yes, absolutely. Well, agriculture is an area where we have a huge potential, as the Commissioner just mentioned, and only half of this 200 million hectares is used for actual agricultural purposes. And it is also a biological, environmentally friendly production of goods that Kazakhstan is engaged in. So for all those bioproducts that Europe needs, Kazakhstan has the answer. But of course, there is great potential in exporting Kazakhstan's grains, but also other products that require certification, such as honey or meat, and we are indeed working on this. I would very much support what the Commissioner said about the need to complete as soon as possible an agreement on the geographical indications, and that will further expand and, well, it provides strengthened legal protection for the European and Kazakh producers, and it will expand our cooperation further. But I see great potential also in many other areas, which I hope we can discuss, don't know, now or later, beyond agriculture, and that's critical raw materials, that's renewable energy sources, that's green hydrogen, that's transportation and logistics, including for transporting agricultural products. So there are very wide range of opportunities that we all, with the Commission, are working to benefit from.
One last element, Commissioner, I want to ask you about is the EU is very well known for its standard setting and its sort of principles-based approach, in particular regarding sort of tackling climate change and the environmental concerns that we like to see put in to the mix when producing any product, not just agricultural products. So how important is it to bring the knowledge and the experience that the EU has in this area to bear when looking at imports from a country like Kazakhstan?
Yes, this is very important. It was mentioned many times during my meetings in Kazakhstan. It was, for example, a very interesting visit in Karaganda University. I working at a very interesting projects, for example, to produce for the organic production, to reduce to produce the crops which are more resilient for the water, for lack of water, because there is a problem everywhere, the drought and lack of water. But unfortunately, last year in Kazakhstan is a lot of water because there was huge flood in many parts of Kazakhstan. And I saw also the consequences of this water. Of course, to prevent the climate change consequences, to improve the water management, this is a very interesting area for cooperation, and Kazakhstan is interested about the cooperation in this subject, and the European Union is interested, and it should be included as a very important part of our cooperation. They are very interested. There is many universities in European Union cooperating with Kazakhs universities, but this is also the area to increase this cooperation. Interesting area is also the organic production. I visited very well managed the big farm, a big agro farm in Kazakhstan, Rodina farm, not so far from Astana. I'm under impression of this is the complex of the farming, processing industry, system of distribution of food, the complex food system, very functioning very well. And also the rural development, because this farm is investing for the improvement of life standards at this village. But what is my observation? That I asked the manager of this farm, do you produce organic food? He said, we are producing organically, but we don't without certification, because they don't use the fertilizers, this is good quality of land, and don't use the pesticides. They produce in organic way without the organic certificate. I think that Kazakhstan has special potential to produce organic food, which is very important because the demand for organic food is increasing. And the cooperation also with exchange of knowledge, know-how about the organic food production is very important. Kazakhstan is neighbor of China, very big market with also increasing demand for the good organic food. This is our ambition. That it is the reason that Kazakhstan is very interesting partner for us, because the quality of food is very important value for both sides in European Union and in Kazakhstan.
Well, before I let you go, I want a final question to both of you. Obviously, you mentioned the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, and Kazakhstan is the first Central Asian country to sign such an agreement. Deputy Minister, I'd like to know, why do you think that is? What got you there first? And then after that, Commissioner, I'd like your hopes for the future as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are the largest in terms of the economic size of the economy in the region, and we are the largest trade partner for the EU in the region of Central Asia. So that's why the negotiations over this agreement, which is called also a second generation agreement, began 12, 13 years ago. And earlier than these negotiations began with other countries in Central Asia. By the way, this is an agreement that covers 29 areas of cooperation, and it covers state procurement, it covers cooperation on human rights, it covers a very, very wide range of issues. But of course, it's first and foremost a trade agreement. And that's why I think it was so relatively quickly negotiated and then signed and ratified. So as I said, it's been in full force since 2020.
And Commissioner, you know, it's been a long time. It's 12, 13 years of negotiations. It might seem short in the period of international relations, but it's in the future we're going to see rapid technological change, developing agri-technologies. What would you like to see for the future for both parties?
I think I'm very optimistic that, first of all, there is good political will to extend our relations. That it was visible all time during my visit in Kazakhstan, but not only during this visit. This is my fifth or sixth time in Kazakhstan. I started my cooperation many years ago when I was a member of the European Parliament and a member of the EU Central Asia delegation, and the Kazakhstan was all time the leader of this is political leader of this region, but also the leader in this aspiration to have to increase relations with Europe, with European Union. No, one of the reasons is probably that part of Kazakhstan is in Europe. It's a Central Asian country, but having part of the territory which is geographically in Europe. But no, I'm optimistic because this is very, very positive approach to develop our relations. We understand in Europe how important Kazakhstan is for us, and in Kazakhstan is also the full understanding that European Union is important partner for Kazakhstan, and this is the good background for development of our bilateral relations. There is also very important that I had many meetings, with personal talks also with members of the business delegation. Some of them, they have experience with trade with Kazakhstan, and there is a generally very positive experience. That, for example, the Kazakh partners are serious partners. There were no complaints about the problems with trade partners. Very good background, and absolutely we should to continue this direction, and I'm sure that we will achieve the very positive results.
One thing, and that is something in relation to what the Commission just said about Kazakhstan being a political leader of the region. This is what we say in the region. In Central Asia, we're all leaders. All 5 countries, we work together. So, so if we succeed, then we succeed together. If one of the country fails, then it means our common failure. So we really work as a team in our region. But thank you very much, Commissioner, for this comment.
Yes, but it is my reflection that for example, in this delegation for the Central Asia relation, Kazakhstan was always the most active country. The many meetings, many initiatives, all time it was observed. Maybe it's also the question of the good people representing Kazakhstan in Europe. The congratulation, but the activity of the Kazakhstan was all time very, very high level. And
no, but we are happy that now Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan have finalized their negotiations over similar agreements. So hopefully these agreements will too be signed between these countries and the EU in the near future.
Well, thank you. A good point to end our small fireside chat on. Deputy Minister, you're staying with us, but could we have a round of applause for the Commissioner? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. See you.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will continue our discussions today by inviting some other panelists to join us. Now, we have joining us online, I am very pleased to say, Samuel Doveri-Vesterby is Managing Director of the European Neighbourhood Council, ENC, joins us. Janibek Arinov is Assistant Professor at Nazarbayev University, and Mariam Agarabi is Research Coordinator at China and Central Asian Studies Centre of Kimap University. And here in person, joining us also from the European Commission, is Taneli Lati, who is the Head of Cabinet for Jutta Urpilainen, the Commissioner for International Partnerships. Thank you very much as well, Taneli, for being here. So, Taneli, let me start with you. We talked a bit about the Enhanced Partnership Cooperation Agreement, primarily a trade agreement, as the Deputy Minister said, but give us the perspective from your cabinet, from your side of the Commission, on what it means for both parties in the future.
Thank you very much. No, first of all, and thank you very much, Anne, for this discussion event. It's very timely, very topical.
Sorry, can I just give you one moment till we grab a microphone for you? I think we're getting one from the back. In the meantime, sorry, Tammy, let me go to Samuel while we're going to get the Head of Cabinet mic'd up. Samuel, same question to you then. What do these enhanced cooperation agreements mean beyond trade, looking to the future?
I think the Deputy Foreign Minister, Vasilenko, made a good point before, which is that it's a second generation trade agreement. Anyone who knows anything about trade agreements from the EU, if we go back 20 years, were small endeavors, short documents. These second generation trade agreements are all encompassing. They're usually many hundreds of pages with annexes that go further, and they really deal with everything beyond just simple custom barriers and trade. They also go into areas like digitalization of customs or copyright, intellectual property, as Deputy Foreign Minister mentioned as well, good governance, and everything that goes with that, so social rights, labor rights, and all these kind of components, which will be key in this kind of global search and the EU business search for new supply chains, in which, of course, Central Asia is a very important contender. So I think when we look at the Enhanced Partnership Cooperation Agreement, EPCA, we have to really look at it from a holistic, much broader view. It's a form of alliance that goes beyond the simple or mere trade agreement.
Thank you, Samuel. Taneli, let's come back to you. You were starting to tell us how the Commission views this going forward.
No, thank you very much. I think, and we have, as has been mentioned, a couple of occasions in this discussion already, and there's a very good contractual basis for our relations between the European Union and Kazakhstan. And we have, and the institutional basis is there. We don't need to negotiate to conclude an agreement anymore. We know that that can take ages and can be complex. We have that in place. There is, at least I sense that over the past 2-3 years, and we have witnessed sort of a clearly strengthened momentum in our relations and cooperation, and we have a very active dialogue on all various policy issues and policy sectors at all levels, including at the highest level, and the frequency and of high-level visits and missions to Kazakhstan and from Kazakhstan here, I think, is exceptionally high. It's not been the case in recent history, as far as I can remember. And there is a mutual wish to deepen, to develop the relations in very concrete terms. And this is very much our business, and this is what we are doing in the area of international partnerships. I think with Kazakhstan, and we are truly building and developing a partnership in all its facets. There is an enormous economic, political, cultural potential there, and that is, I see it flourishing and developing quite quickly. Just to mention a couple of areas where I think I hope that also in the broader public pays attention to something that is happening and that is very positive, and that is in the area of connectivity. for example, and in the area of transport connectivity between EU and Central Asia. There was 1 year ago, and there was a study, a feasibility study published on transport connections between Central Asia and Europe, very much driven actually by activity of Kazakhstan as well. Now, earlier this year, end of January, we organized, based on that study, an investment trying to collect commitments and interested parties together to see how we could actually start building those links. And the investments required are up to the tune of about 18-19 billion euros over several years. Now, personally, I thought that we could perhaps expect commitments of, say, maybe 4 or 5 billion in total. We saw the double of that, half a year after the study was published. I think that tells an important story about the interest and the potential that is there. Another area, digital connectivity. There as well, and we are working with Kazakhstan, but also with the other countries of the region to create digital links that are secure, that are always available, that are reliable and sustainable. There's a lot sort of very practical activity taking place, and I think in the current geopolitical context, and good news are not too often to be seen or heard, but there is a good news and good story to be told and shared in the relation and cooperation between Kazakhstan, the Central Asian region, and the European Union.
We will come on to the international geopolitical context in a bit, but perhaps, Mariam, I could come to you next to ask you to build a little bit on this question of connectivity and the importance of, for example, ICTs and that sort of development. What do you take away from that?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your kind invitation. On the question of connectivity, I think that is one of the key areas where the European Union could help Kazakhstan, because we have this on multiple, recommendations, studies that have been published so far, that ICTs are at the heart of sustainable development and very essential for transition to green economy. So internally, closing the digital gap here in Kazakhstan in such a vast geography can help diversify the economy. It creates decentralized markets, boosts development in the periphery, and more importantly, it prevents unnecessary domestic and internal migrations. But in terms of the trade and external economic relations, digitalization has been a top priority for all the countries of the region, especially in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. The recommendations include, for example, removal of technical trade barriers, digitalization of customs, transport documents, increased soft interconnectivities of neighboring countries, which will boost trade, and everybody who is in all the states of the region, as well as because we are going to talk about the Middle Corridor, and other states along the Middle Corridor will directly benefit from this in terms of trade.
Thank you. Shanabek, let me come to you and ask you to, as your first intervention, to pick out what you've heard so far that you think resonates most, that you would highlight as a priority.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. I'm happy to learn that there are good developments in EU-Kazakhstan relations, and especially in the field of diversifying trade relations. I'm not an economist by training, but if we look at the structure of EU-Kazakhstan trade, the amount is quite impressive, especially for the economy of Kazakhstan. But if we look at the structure, the majority of this trade turnover is dominated by Kazakhstan's exports of natural resources to the European market, right? And for me, it's a bit of question how sustainable this trade is, given some changes, green transition, in the European market, as well as in Kazakhstan. So I think it's a good thing that diversifying and expanding new areas for trade cooperation between the countries. And then in that sense, of course, agriculture, given Kazakhstan's tremendous potential capacity, could be one of the areas where we can work and strengthen the trade relations. Then other point is, again, when we talk about EU-Kazakhstan relations, critical minerals is one of the topics which pops up quite frequently. And so I hope that in this field we don't end up with a similar situation when Kazakhstan just exports critical minerals to the European market, and Kazakhstan will be able to import some technology to process those critical minerals and export some products rather than just raw materials to the European market. I think those are the things that we need to keep in mind. It's also important for the developing of the middle corridor. I mean, we don't want to be just kind of one station. Kazakhstan has one station just in the this transport route between China and the European Union. So we want to be essential part of this middle corridor where we can sell and sometimes buy some products both from the European market and to the European market and also the Chinese market. So I think all those things are very important, and these things are quite challenging in implementing in practice. We all understand that. For this, I think both the European side and the Kazakh side need to do their own homeworks and find those potential areas where we can start from small and maybe in the future expand the cooperation. Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested to hear, Deputy Minister, where you see this fitting in. We've heard Shani Bek arguing for a little bit more broader approach rather than the simple focus on natural resources that he's arguing is central. So perhaps you could pick up on some of these thoughts regarding technology transfer and what your thoughts are on that.
Right. And I will fully agree with Professor Arinov in describing the exports from Kazakhstan as being heavily skewed towards just exports of raw materials. That's true. And that is something that we all need to work very hard to change. And we are working already. And for example, rare earth metals. Kazakhstan already produces 18 out of 34 such metals that are identified by the EU as rare earth. And yet we would like to attract not just investment from the EU and European companies, but also technology, so that there is several stages of processing in Kazakhstan. And that's the business model that we are intending and planning and are already implementing in contracts with European companies with whom partnerships in, say, lithium production are being developed. I also would like to say that this will also help, of course, reduce the volumes of transportation, because we will not be simply exporting ores, but rather already processed goods. And if we want to use the middle corridor, then the higher quality of the goods, the better for the shipping companies and for the producers, etc. But we also work with European companies, such as German company Svevind, to develop green hydrogen. And there is a mammoth project being implemented right now, prepared for the implementation, rather, I should say, which would entail the production of 2 million tons of green hydrogen and 11 million tons of green ammonia beginning in 2030, 2032. So again, this will require a lot of effort for us to transport these goods. They're destined mostly for Europe, and green hydrogen in that amount will account for about 1/5 of the European Union's need in green hydrogen at that time, so projected need at the time. So again, this is perhaps raw material, but raw material with higher added value and a different sort of raw material. It's not oil simply.
I think we've moved there talking a little bit about the digital transition to the green transition, the two twin transitions we talk about in Brussels a lot, and the importance of those. Samuel, I'd like to come back to you indeed and ask specifically, what does the EU's focus on sustainable development and green technologies mean for traditional industries in the region?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe just add on to what Zannibek said before. I'm lucky I see Zannibek again this week. We were also together last week. It feels like Brussels is bubbling with roundtables and private meetings on Central Asia and continuity, which is a good thing. And so Zannibek, mentioned like he's happy to hear there's this commitment. I mean, there's a good reason for why there is this commitment. We do a lot of consultations with the business sector, the European Neighbourhood Council. And what we see, I mean, whether we're talking to business in Germany or in France or in Italy for that sake, is that all of them are fully aware of the fact that the Suez Canal is being disrupted. So we're looking at, I don't know if you've seen, but if listeners have seen that between April last year and April this year, so in 1 year span, the Suez Canal traffic, according to IMF figures, has gone down by 60%. This is a violent disruption of our world trade, of our cargo trade. And for that simple reason, European businesses are, of course, now investing elsewhere in multi-corridor policies. That means IMEC, it means Suez, and of course, it means the Trans-Caspian or so-called middle corridor as well. So I just wanted to add that one point. Then with regards to renewable energy and renewable sourcing, the problem is that with all supply chains and renewables is that inside the European Union, things are very expensive. Energy is very expensive, supply chains, costs for labor are very expensive, and so forth. And also, we don't have the kind of access to critical raw materials that Zannibek and Deputy Foreign Minister were talking about before. And as a result, Central Asia is a very interesting place because it is well connected. It does have, high literacy rates, it has high female employment, and it has a whole range of other things which render supply chain relocation interesting. And in addition to that, it also happens to have a low salinated water basin, which is the Caspian. So that's very important when you have electrolysis, which is, the source essentially of hydrogen. And at the same time, Kazakhstan specifically is interesting because you'd need a large amount of square kilometers. Kazakhstan is the size of the whole European Union nearly in length. And so you need that kind of space in order to be cost effective and maximize your effectiveness on solar and wind power. And so that's, of course, needed for the hydrogen that Deputy Foreign Minister was talking about vis-a-vis this investment in the Svevind investment in Aktau.
Taneli, let me come on to you. And in the context of, if you like, the green transition and indeed the importance of the middle corridor and the international supply chain network, I mean, being very real, to what degree does the EU's own agenda and its own needs shape that of its international partnerships?
Oh, they do, of course, have an impact. And we have considered, and right from the start of this mandate, that it is our task to project the EU internal priorities of a green and digital transition in our relations and with our partner countries. And these are global challenges that we are trying to jointly address, and what we can and we will do to help our partners and support that. There is an interest, a mutual interest there, I think, and we don't need to hide it. I think here, and what Zannibek was saying about the concerns with regard to the structure of Kazakh exports, for example, in the future, I understand that well, but I wouldn't be too concerned because I would see that at the moment what we are seeing globally is an accelerated, very fast restructuring of global supply chains, global value chains. Companies are looking for new suppliers, alternative routes, diversification of their production networks and all of that. That offers Kazakhstan and the Central Asian region a lot of opportunity. As Samuel was also saying, and that also transport routes have been affected by the geopolitical instability. So and there will have to be a diversification of global transport routes as well, which is why the Trans-Caspian transport route is such an important project, and it creates an alternative and creates stability and offers potential. When it comes to critical raw materials, I think it was a year ago and that we signed the memorandum of understanding between European Union and Kazakhstan, and it was one of the first ones that we concluded, because in a way, and it was fairly straightforward and easy. I mean, we see eye to eye on how we want to do that. For us, it is important that when we move forward in the implementation of that memorandum, in the partnership for critical raw materials, that we focus on the local value creation, the local value addition. So it's not only about mining and extraction, exporting raw materials. It is about processing them, adding value, and creating local value content, local value addition. In order to make that possible, again, and the transport contacts are absolutely vital, but also and the digital network and that will make it possible and for this value addition and to be created. That is why, and yes, we are also trying to promote the digital infrastructure investment that is required, but at least as important is also the governance structure, the regulatory framework for the digital sphere, and education and training in the digital area. In order to benefit from all the potential and of the digital, you need to have all of that, and it's not enough just to have cables and infrastructure. You also need the institutional and governance setting there. And there I think we have something in Europe and that we are happy to share on bad and good experience. But I think even in global terms, European consumers and industry enjoy exceptionally high level of availability at very reasonable prices of digital services. I don't think we often talk about the US as the great leader in digital transition, and in some aspects they very much are. But I think a consumer in Europe is very privileged and compared to any other place in the world. There's something that we can perhaps share, and how to get there. And it's not an ideal. Europe constantly needs to learn and improve. That's clear. But there are things that I think we can share to mutual benefit.
Can we just have good experience, please?
But it's also sometimes good to be able to avoid the bad experience.
Mm-hmm. Early warnings also good.
Okay.
Samuel, I think you wanted to come in again on this question of supply chains.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that during the exception of the Trans-Caspian corridor, there was a lot of in-between discussions on, does it go through my country? Does it benefit me as much? Whether it's in the Caucasus or whether it's Turkey and Black Sea, meaning Georgia, Constanza and so forth, and or whether it's in Central Asia as well, with Uzbekistan being in the middle and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan not always being the natural trajectory that leads to China if we're talking about transit trade. And so that's where supply chain hubs are so important. Number one, because unless countries simply want to be transit trade forever between China and the EU, which I think is, as Zanibek correctly mentioned, absolutely undesirable for anyone, right? You'd want to be part of the modern supply chain, which was mentioned before, which is being relocated around. And this is the opportunity then where businesses and trade association and business groups in Uzbekistan, in Turkmenistan, in Tajikistan, in Kazakhstan and in Kyrgyzstan can step up and say, this is not only about transit, it's about something might be critically mined in Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, it might be assembled, it might be the service provision or the intelligence work behind customer services might be in Bishkek, and so forth and so forth. So that then it becomes interesting to see how the full mapping can take place and how everyone can essentially benefit from these new relocated supply chains, which is what I wanted to add.
Mariam, I'm interested in your thoughts as well, particularly on the middle corridor. As I understand, you want to make a distinction between trade and transit. Is that right?
Yes, I think that it is, this is a follow-up on what Janibek said, Samuel just mentioned, that the distinction between trade and transit is important to be made, because these are two different approaches and have two different outcomes in terms of the sustainable development outlooks for the countries involved, not just about their role in the supply chain, but also when we talk about sustainable development, we need to consider the social effects and all that. So the problem with transit countries, we have experienced this over and over again, is that transit in itself creates a rent effect and has an inverse outcome for the economy. It doesn't lead to development. It actually impedes development in other sectors because the country doesn't need to diversify the economy anymore. So that's one point. And another point that I wanted to make on the middle corridor is a bit of a devil's advocate one, and that is that we know the importance of it and we know the urgency of it. So the problem is that we may overlook some aspects, and one very important point is the environmental security of it. The environmental security of the middle corridor in Central Asia, particularly because we know that Central Asia is severely affected by climate change, and it's a high-risk region in terms of incidents of extreme weather events, natural disasters, be it earthquakes or floods or drought. So despite the fact that the EU and all of the partner countries involved in the development of middle corridor are very serious about it, they're committed financially in terms of policy measures, the political will is there. The environmental sustainability of the route must remain a key concern.
Danelli, you wanted to come back in.
You know, just very quickly to comment on Mariam's point and on transport versus transit, or trade versus transit. I mean, for me, when I think about the Trans-Caspian transport corridor, I mean, I intuitively think about the physical link between Central Asia and European Union, and that's my first thought. I mean, that's what we are trying to build. Transit will be facilitated by that, but I mean, it's not, at least in my mind, I mean, it's not the first objective that we are creating new transit routes and between China and European Union, and this is not the point, and it's really about connecting Central Asia with European Union. But I think there's also another aspect here. I mean, sometimes I have to really admire what the Deputy Minister was also saying, and the informal but very close cooperation and between the countries of the region and the leaders, very close contact. I think it's something admirable. I sometimes hope that we in Europe and that it would be as easy. I don't know, and maybe it looks only easy on the surface, but that's already good. But something that puzzles me a little bit is how little trade there is between the countries of the region. And that may also have as one reason the transport links. So I hope that with the transport connections that we hopefully will be building soon, that will facilitate also the intra-regional trade, which should again have wealth creation effects to all participants.
Yes, thank you. If I may interject also and comment on some of what Samuel said and others, you know, this EBRD study that was referred to earlier, it was there that an interesting concept was introduced that stated that so-called Central Trans-Caspian Transportation Network traversing through South and Kazakhstan is the most sustainable option. But then this same study introduced this two-layered approach with sort of layers accompanying this route on both southern and northern side, expanding to 500 kilometers from the main route, and thus encompassing all 5 countries of Central Asia. And it is the projects within this 500-kilometer wide stretch across Central Asia from east to west that these 19 or 20 billion euros in terms of investment are needed. So it is this approach, this sort of complex, holistic approach that we also very much support, because we think that this is going to help connectivity in the region, and this is going to again help us to make sure that no one is left behind in terms of this regional development. And this is the most important priority, I think, for us in terms of transport connectivity. Yes, I would also agree with the notions and comments of the fact that intra-regional trade is not yet developed to the extent it should have been, and that's perhaps the consequence of still disintegration of the Soviet Union, that the countries in Central Asia sort of ran away to trade with everybody else except with the immediate neighbors in Central Asia. Yet this is a situation that is changing very much over the past 6 or so years, ever since this process of very intensive discussions and rapprochement, shall we say, in Central Asia began. So now the trade has grown from 5 billion intra-regional trade, from $5 billion to $10 billion, and there are plans to expand it even further. I'm sure that we will achieve that. But I will also add another thing, and that is that we do feel this impact of disruptions to the global supply chains that Samuel was referring to, when we see how drastically the volumes of container traffic across the middle corridor fluctuate because of the situation in the Suez Canal. For example, last year the volume of container traffic across the middle corridor shrank by 30%. Because the shipping by sea again became more competitive and cheaper. But now, because of these disruptions, in the first 4 months of this year, the volume of container traffic across the Caspian Sea, across the middle corridor, jumped by 70%, because it's again becoming competitive. So what I'm saying is that the middle corridor is an important alternative. It's an important addition to the overall mix of east-west transportation connections in Eurasia. And that is why we in Kazakhstan see a great deal of complementarity in all those initiatives that various global competitors promote, meaning Belt and Road Initiative put forward and promoted by China, or Global Gateway Initiative put forward and promoted by the EU. So as far as Kazakhstan and all the other countries in Central Asia are concerned, these concepts and programs and initiatives are complementary, because they will help us break out of this dependency on other transit countries, and it will help us overcome the difficulties of being landlocked.
Johnny Beck, let me come back to you. We've sort of wandered quite broadly, but I think you wanted to bring it back to the point of people and connectivity.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, when we talk about this middle corridor, all these transport routes, digital connectivity, all the things are very, very important, and then we cannot deny their significance, and especially, I think, given this commitment, the political will and financial commitment, I think that things may slowly change, and I think it's time for actions. But when we talk about connectivity, and maybe it's my kind of professional background that kind of pushes me to raise this issue, we very often neglect the importance of people-to-people connectivity. So this is a point that I mentioned earlier in Brussels earlier this week, and I just wanted to reiterate that to sustain all this transportations, the digitalization, critical raw materials, and then other developments happening between the EU and Kazakhstan, I think one important thing is developing and strengthening, deepening people-to-people connectivity, in the sense that, okay, we may need some professionals or some training for our experts, for our kind of people who will be working in this field. We may need some awareness raising between the communities, business communities, I don't know, expert communities in other fields between the European and Kazakh. So in that sense, I think the importance of this people-to-people connectivity cannot be overestimated. And unfortunately, I mean, again, from this also comes from my personal experience. When we talk about the people-to-people connectivity between EU and Kazakhstan, we mostly talk about one way, the dominance of EU's linkages to the kind of to the region, let's say, to Central Asia, while people in the region having quite some hard time getting access to Europe or to the EU because of easy issues, because of other constraints. I think those are the things that we also need to keep in mind. And we've just learned last week that there are some good developments when it comes to this visa facilitation negotiations between Kazakhstan and the EU. If that comes into the reality, I think that could be kind of a very good development, especially from the point of the people of Kazakhstan. And given that Central Asian societies are very young kind of society, I think, again, and growing society, expanding society, again, I just wanted to make a point that it's important also to keep in mind this aspect. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I just remind our audience in the room, of course, they can use their smartphones to ask questions of all the panelists, and as well, those joining online, you can use the function on your screen or go to slido.com and put in EU-Kazakhstan as the code, or indeed scan the QR code that you can see, so we get some questions from our audience as well. I do see one very brief one here saying the recently published REA EU-Kazakhstan Market Entry Agri Handbook highlights that EU foods are increasingly popular in Kazakhstan. Can any of the panel highlight some of the products they feel will be popular in the Kazakhstan market? I don't know, Deputy Minister, whether you want to take that.
Cheese, olives, olive oil, wine. We have some of that, but I think there is always room for more. But if I can go back a little bit to what Professor Zhanibek Arinov was just saying just now, it looks like he saw my talking points about visa facilitation and people-to-people contact, but he felt it on his own, in his own life experience. And we are indeed grateful to the European Union member states and European Commission for moving ahead with this, with the preparations for negotiations with Kazakhstan over the visa facilitation agreement. I know, of course, that this is a sensitive subject in Brussels, and yet I'd like to say that Kazakhstan, of course, poses no migration risk to the European Union. The European Union has an enormous soft power advantage in Kazakhstan, with people willing very much to go to Europe for vacation, for business, for medical reasons, and I think to study as students. And I think this will go a long, long way towards strengthening this advantage that the EU has even further. So people-to-people mobility, connectivity is very much a thing that we all work together on, and we need to sustain this movement during this commission and hopefully during the next commission.
Thank you. Mariam, I believe you have a point you wanted to make there as well.
Yes, about the agri-food discussion, I just wanted to add that in terms of Kazakhstan's exports, you know that the main exports are grains and oilseeds and so on. There is a gap here in terms of food processing. Now, we know that above 40% of our exports are processed items, but these are primary processing level, not secondary or tertiary. So that is actually one of the sectors that we can look into joint ventures with European businesses who are experts in this field, and this will bring them closer to the markets, especially in the times that we are all worried about food security, particularly for exports, re-exports to the global south. So this is one place that there is a gap and potential for collaboration.
Thank you. So for the last sort of 15, 20 minutes or so, I do want to look to the future, but also take into account the sort of broader political context that we see at play in the world. Samuel, let me come to you first and ask what should be the priorities of the EU-Kazakh cooperation following the elections that we're seeing happening here in Europe. Will a change in the makeup, if you like, of the European, many national level countries, but also the European Parliament, and a shift in focus in terms of who's going to be running things at EU level? What sort of impact should that have? Will that have? What can be the predictions there? And then look further afield as well at the, as we might say, unstable geopolitical context internationally.
Yeah, of course, there'll be new EU leaders, there'll be a new parliament, and all of these people will have different or sometimes lacking knowledge about the complexities which are essentially changing on an extremely regular basis. I would be predisposed to think that instead of them necessarily prioritizing something else, they need a lot of information about the current setting. And I think, again, like we do a lot of consultation with business, there's no doubt in my mind that the business sector is looking towards multiple corridors, and the Trans-Caspian corridor in Central Asia and Kazakhstan specifically is of a lot of importance. But there are some challenges in the future, and I would like, of course, also to hear Deputy Foreign Minister's view on these things. Like, for example, the mediation, the very positive mediation effort which Kazakhstan has led on Armenia and Azerbaijan. How is that developing, and how will that perhaps change the investor focus in an even more positive way? Also, questions of, for example, some problems along the way have been, has allowing the Organization of Turkic States to embrace, the Turkish Cypriot side of the Cyprus Island. Has that been a strategic mistake? Because, of course, on the EU side in the Foreign Affairs Council, that has led to problems in the relationship. So these kind of things, for me at least, as a researcher, are definitely the main concerns that we have, as opposed to necessarily the new parliamentarians or the new commission.
Janibek, same question to you, looking at the international geopolitical climate and including the war in Ukraine and various tensions that we see perhaps rising between China and the US, and of course the US presidential election coming up later this year, which could see a major shift one way or the other. What should the future relationship be like between the EU and Kazakhstan, and how central are all these other concerns to that relationship?
I think Kazakhstan and the EU have all this legal political framework for deepening the cooperation. I think it's time now to deliver. So we've been talking about this middle corridor and the investors forum earlier this year, and all these commitments, and I think we need a little bit push to be faster in implementing those commitments. Maybe in some cases we may lack a bit of political will to be bold in our not just kind of decisions, negotiations, but in our actions. I think those are the critical things. I think it's time to deliver rather than. We have all this the framework to deliver the better and the improve the relations between Kazakhstan and the EU. Maybe one point would be from the Kazakhstan's point of view. I think. It's critical for us not to geopolitize maybe the relations between Kazakhstan and the EU. Again, given where Kazakhstan is situated, given our close connections between, with Russia, with China, including economic connections, I think for us it would be very critical not to geopolitize the relations between the EU and Kazakhstan. And maybe a final point would be that. Maybe it's also related to the previous point that I mentioned, that again, last week we learned that the EU was considering to revise its strategy for Central Asia, which was accepted back in 2019. Again, from my personal point of view, I don't really see why it's needed, why the EU needs to spend its time revising the already good strategy. Yes, the context changed, but the main aims or the main kind of items, priorities of the EU in that strategy, I doubt that they were going to change. So instead of those bureaucratic, very often time-taking initiatives, maybe it's time to sit together and do and deliver the things where it's possible.
Mariam, I'd like to get your thoughts, your final thoughts, looking to the future, and in particular maybe questions about how proactive the EU should be with regard to things like technology transfer or indeed this political dialogue.
Well, first of all, I want to add to the points that were just raised that I agree that the current situation and the relations between the EU and Kazakhstan, Central Asia as a whole, shouldn't be geopoliticized. The thing is that I know this is a difficult subject to approach, but the war will end. All wars will end. And we all need to think about the post-war architecture of the relationship between Kazakhstan and the EU, or the Central Asian countries and the EU. This shouldn't be just on the side of the fact that because of the war, there are disruptions in supply chain. This should be a long-term planning, and we should act now, and we should plan for it now. We shouldn't wait for the war to end, although I personally would prefer to end right now. In terms of the points that you raised about sorry, what was the first point that you made?
Just looking to the future and where the proactivity should come from in terms of a push-pull relationship.
Okay, so the proactivity, I think the proactivity. So we on the political level, we have the will, we have the facilitation. Political leaders are facilitating. Proactivity here needs to take place on the business level. So we need more contact, direct contact between business communities on both sides, so then they can get involved directly on the ground, and that would lead to all those points that I raised earlier in terms of technology transfer and so on.
Well, thank you. Taneli, let me ask you the same question. I mean, and obviously in the context of international partnerships, the EU and Europe Commissioner Pilainen in particular have to take and be cognizant of all the different factors. But how do you then view that through the lens of one particular relationship with a country?
Well, thank you very much. I think, and I had a bit the impression that Professor Arinov doesn't only have your speaking points, but mine as well. And they are very similar thoughts, that it's really about focusing on implementation, being concrete and delivering results on the ground, and that we need to focus on. And there, I think we are making reasonable progress. And for example, on this Trans-Caspian transport corridor, we have a technical platform established, and that will oversee the implementation and the very concrete implementation of it. And that will have its first meeting now next week in Astana, I believe. And that, I think, is, yes, of course, a platform, task force, things like this. I mean, they are bureaucratic and administrative, but you need these kind of things in order to get things moving also on the ground. And I'm quite hopeful there. Mariam and Janipek, and you also made the point about human development and the softer side of our relations needing attention. And there, I can assure you that this has not gone forgotten. And we are still investing also financial means and human resources in the people-to-people connectivity. And it's clearly a part of our global gateway strategy, that is not only about concrete metal and infrastructure, but it's very much about human development. It's about education. It's about health. It's about the regulatory environment and regulatory alignment that we would like to see, which will facilitate again economic, cultural, and people-to-people contacts. So it's a very holistic approach, and that we try to promote in our relations and in our partnership with Kazakhstan and the Central Asian region. The visa facilitation agreement is clearly, I think, a single subject that will gain importance, and where I hope that we will see progress in the coming months. For the near future, I'm not at all worried about the importance of Central Asia on the European agenda somehow disappearing, and with the transition and into a new parliament, new commission, and so forth. I think, and this is a subject that enjoys so much support also in the civil service, that the continuity is already ensured with that, but also at political level. I mean, political leaders will want to develop this relation further. I'm absolutely certain. I cannot stop and I cannot leave this room without paying tribute and commending the work that the Embassy of Kazakhstan here is actually doing to keep Kazakhstan and our relation on the agenda. And you're right. I mean, there needs to be this education of Europeans about Central Asia, about Kazakhstan, and it needs to continue. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and I'm sure that my successors will do so as well. I've even had the pleasure to enjoy some of the agro-food products of Kazakhstan, which I can recommend to anyone, and really great quality and great enjoyment. But so I think the continuity will be there. The contractual basis is there. The objectives are clear. I think we share in the same direction. We see a momentum, and there's clearly progress and sort of reform or momentum also in the region. I would agree with Janibek that the first thing that we need is not a new strategy, and the 2019 strategy is well valid. I mean, I can't see what different it could include. But it's a bit in the European reflex. And when there's a discussion, something is important, then you develop a new strategy. But I've been here long enough to have seen, I think, 4 or 5 Central Asia strategies. And it's not the strategy that makes the difference. It's the implementation, and I think we are getting there.
With so many things. Mariam, I would like to say thank you to you, as I know you need to leave briefly, as well as our other online participants. Taneli, I'm going to have a last provocative question to you as the representative of the Commission still here on the stage. We've seen in recent years the word resilience has become a watchphrase. Alongside it, we've also seen strategic autonomy as one of the creations, the key messages that's come out of the crises that we've seen, including the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Strategic autonomy, it's a buzz phrase, but there's a lot of thought behind it. There's a lot of arguments about what it really means. Is it contradictory to the expanding alliance with other partnerships beyond our borders?
No, I think it's clearly very much a part of it. The strategic autonomy. I mean, we sometimes forget that it's that the whole expression goes open strategic autonomy, and this means it means diversification of partnerships and diversification of supply routes, because obviously, I mean, Europe cannot succeed in a vacuum, and we need partners. We like to think of ourselves as masters of trade and investment and globalization, and I think it is still valid. But dependencies on single suppliers, on single partnerships, and there we have seen the fragilities and that these kind of dependencies can create. And so our solution and our suggestion is a diversification, and that is very much also as an idea in our deepening of our relation with Kazakhstan and the Central Asian region.
Well, Deputy Minister, I'll give you the final word. There's a lot of things to react to, so it would take a few moments to unpack what you've heard and then look to the future in this positive way.
Yes, I've taken notes, so I will go through them and then I will make a general comment in the very end. I'd like to thank Samuel for bringing up the meeting that we hosted in Almaty between Armenian and Azeri foreign ministers. But however much we would have liked for our role to be bigger other than the host, we still were not mediators there. We were hosts. We provided the most beneficial conditions, I think, for the talks. The talks lasted twice longer than they were intentionally being planned to last, meaning 2 days, 2 full days of talks. And they were quite productive and successful according to both sides. And we hope that they come back, and we hope that they continue along this process that is in a very delicate stage. And I think it is important at this stage for everybody around the world, in Europe, in America, in Russia, in our region, to continue to support these efforts by the two sides to finally put behind the more than 3 decades of hostility and to come to the signing of the peace treaty and the treaty on the principles of relations that they are now negotiating. So I think we can only give as much support as we can, but it is for these two countries to really work together and resolve their differences right now. I also took note of the comment about the so-called non-recognized Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. I should say that well, Kazakhstan supports territorial integrity of all states, including of the Republic of Cyprus. We, in particular, highlighted this issue in relevant comments following recent developments, and we think that the resolution to the Cyprus issue can only be achieved through the UN-sponsored process, and we very much hope that this process can continue and can lead to the resolution after so many decades of stalemate. In terms of the new European Union strategy for Central Asia, yes, there is this natural reaction to take stock 5 years after, since the adoption of this most recent iteration of this EU Central Asia strategy in 2019. The European Parliament did just that, passing a very wide-ranging resolution in January this year. But even before that, the EU and Central Asian foreign ministers, all 27 and 5 foreign ministers, adopted a roadmap for our cooperation into the foreseeable future, which covers no less than 79 specific areas of cooperation. So it is our common belief that this will be enough, so to speak, and I would agree with you that implementation is key now. So we know what we need to do. We have a roadmap that we need to follow, so that is what's going to be happening. And finally, I'd like to mention, of course, the general geopolitical context that you already referred to, Madam Baker. I heard an interesting word from Professor Arinov, geopoliticize. I like that. In fact, there is a lot of geopoliticization of relations with Kazakhstan, with Central Asia. There is obviously an intensifying competition, shall we say, between global power players for cooperation with Kazakhstan and other Central Asian states. And I think that it is important to realize that that's part of the competition for global South, shall we say, or global East. But I think it is important to take Kazakhstan as a middle power and take the region as an emerging region that is fully aware of its interests, that cooperates much better and closer together than used to be in the past several decades of independence. And it is important to understand that Kazakhstan can play a role as a middle power among other middle powers to strengthen the multilateral system, to strengthen the to help strengthen the international law-based system that we have built in the past 80 years since the end of the Second World War, and we need to continue to work as an international community to strengthen this international law-based system, and Kazakhstan as a middle power can help strengthen that.
Indeed, I know your president said recently that middle powers like Kazakhstan are rather unburdened by the complexities of superpower politics, which is perhaps a relief rather than a burden. Well, thank you very much for our discussion today. We've been focused a little bit more on trade and economics rather than these politics, but I really value the input here at the end. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you for those questions that unfortunately we didn't get time to get to. And thank you for your audience, for your attention. Remember, you can join more Euractiv debates by following the hashtag EA Debates, and you'll see plenty more coming up soon. In the meantime, I wish you all a very good day, and thanks for your attention.